Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to talk about some beefy looking NAS. This is the ORICO CyberVault. This is one of a 5-unit series coming out from ORICO, arriving on crowdfunding at the very least in July 2025. We're recording this at the very start of June, and these are 2 prototype units the brand sent me a couple of weeks ago. They arrived just before I went to Computex, and these are 2 of that 5 product series. Now, yes, we are talking about a product going on crowdfunding, so, standard disclaimer, this is not the same as traditional retail. Make sure you use a credit card, make sure you use a secure means of making a payment where you can pull back the money. But nevertheless, ORICO is a brand that we have talked about on the channel before. They have a well-established portfolio of data storage solutions. We've used a lot of their USB 4 and Thunderbolt devices, a docking station as well. So I'm quite familiar with the brand as it is. They even have already had a range of NAS solutions for a number of years, only available in China for the most part. But these are slightly different. These are bigger, beefier devices, not only intending to rock out with their own NAS operating system, but the brand is also saying they are going to support the use of third-party operating systems as well. Your True NAS, your Unraid, your Open Media Vault, whatever. But these are prototypes. This is not the final product. These are 2 devices that were sent to me. This is the CF56 and this is the CF56 Pro. Now, the reason I keep have to highlight that these are prototypes is because these weren't perfect. I actually had some correspondence back and forth with the brand very early doors, and they already highlighted some of the problems. They already noticed the problems that I'd highlighted in my email, and we're already discussing that there was already a 2nd and 3rd generation upgrade of some of the components inside. Something we'll talk about later on there. But when it comes to the whole series, those 5 SKUs, these range from an N15 twin-lay Intel quad-core CPU version that's rocking out with 5 hard drive bays and 2 M.2 NVMe bays with 2.5 GBE, and that with 8 gig of memory scalable to 32 gig. That's the entry-level 5 bay. Then it goes into an N305 8-core 8-thread version with 8 gig of memory, 6 M.2 bays, 4 at the top, 2 at the bottom. And this continues to scale up not only to a 5 hard drive, 6 NVMe Intel i5 12-core 16-thread processor version, the i5 1240p, but there's even an all-flash version with 6 M.2 NVMe slots and a 10-bay powerhouse version that's got 10 hard drive bays. It's got 6 M.2 NVMe bays and dual-port 10 GBE as well. This is an enormously expansive series of devices that they're going to be rolling out with, not dissimilar to what we saw Ugreen do back in 2024. Although we already know the launch of this, they're saying early July. I'm going to say the first half of July. I very much doubt they'll hit the first week of July. With regards to pricing, they weren't able to confirm that price point right now, unfortunately, at the time of recording. If that has changed between me making this video and it going out, I'll add it here on screen. But apart from that, I would look at the pricing of what the Ugreen NAS is rolled out with and look vaguely around that price. I will say the hardware profile is only really outdone by the design, because fair play to them. I really like this design. Now, the front panel, this stands for all but the flash and the 10 bay, which are slightly different. These arrive with a removable magnetic panel. That panel, by the way, gives you setup information. You've got your SATA bays all feeding onto a dedicated SATA board there inside. You've got LEDs there based on the front. You have ventilation built in all the way around the front of that panel. On the rear, we have got a large rear fan. Again, if you look at the 10 bay, that's the only dual fan model. Again, that fan there, fully adjustable within the operating system. And along the base of the system, you've got your standard 10 gig USB, you've got your USB 2s, you've got 2.5 GB and 10 GBE on this non-Pro model. The Pro model's got 2 times 10G, and it's got a standard barrel output jack there. Again, the PSU will change depending on the CPU profile you choose to use. Now, what about those M.2 slots? Actually, I'm not going to put that on there, because this is another lovely bit of design there on the top. Boop, magnetically attached, has a removable mesh cleaning panel, and there on the inside you've got your 4 M.2 NVMe slots. And on the base, if we grab ourselves a screwdriver, the base panel there has an additional 2 more M.2 NVMe slots there built in the base for you to install your SSDs of choice, with plenty of room, I hope you can see there, for the heatsink that you want to use. So I've gone for a full height fat heatsink there. That is that Seagate Fire CUDA. And then inside, you've got that SODIMM DDR5 slot there. Now, I will say, I know this is a silly point, ORICO definitely changed the colour of that RAM. I thought you'd had a burnt out RAM SODIMM slot. You don't. That's just a horrible colour scheme to put on any label on any component. Get rid of that. But while we're talking about memory, it's worth keeping in mind that even if you go for the high-end i5 model, you're not going to get ECC memory. This device does not support ECC memory. That shouldn't come as a huge surprise. It only arrives with standard SODIMM slot. There's a single SODIMM slot there on the N305 model, and on the i5 model, there are 2 SODIMM slots there that you can upgrade the device to, I believe, 64 gig. So again, I know the lack of ECC, particularly on that flash model, is going to put some users off. But again, that is really a CPU choice for a lot of brands. I don't know what some of you were thinking, those M.2 NVMe slots there at the top. Is there room for heatsinks inside there, even with that top plate? Well, I'm pleased to say there very much is. This is the fully populated one, so you can hear a lot more heaving because this has got fully populated drives inside. And as you can see, this one, I've taken advantage of different heat sinks there across the board, and everything fits absolutely fine. I've got dual height SSDs in there as well, running like an absolute charm. I will also highlight that the Pro Series model, not only does it have 2x10 as mentioned earlier on, but also has 2 USB 4 ports there. Now, real quick, when I was looking at the one that's got a 2.5 gig and 10 gig port there, the performance I saw externally over SMB was not great. The brand were keen to highlight that they are going through the phases of optimization right now, and that was why the external performance I was seeing wasn't great. So at the moment, that's why this video is still very much about the prototype, not the final product. Keep that in mind. And the same goes for the 2x10 GBE model. I barely got it to crack a gigabyte, even when I was accessing the main drives there at the top. So again, I'm going to wait until full optimization. This is still a product in development. And also those USB 4 ports, I'm sad to say you can't use those for direct network access, at least with the software they have included. So you can only really use those for USB connected peripherals, predominantly storage. Another interesting little point I'm in the process of examining is the fact that inside I actually noticed another 7th M.2 NVMe slot inside. Now, I was reluctant to take the prototype device apart too much during my initial testing without undermining the results of things like temperature and power assessment. But there is definitely another M.2 NVMe slot inside there that I was unable to ascertain via SSH because the software the system arrives with does not have SSH rolled in at the moment. The software, much like the hardware right now, is still in the prototype stage at the time of recording, and therefore I couldn't easily SSH into it. Again, I'm examining that and going into this with other operating systems very, very soon, but I didn't want to go into too much work on the prototype device for you guys when I know the finished product will be here, and then we can really assess those values. But there is definitely a 7th bay inside there, at least in the Pro model. Now, for those individual M.2 NVMe slots, obviously, depending on the CPU profile model that you go for, the lanes that are going to be assigned to each of those slots are going to differ. Now, if you go for the N305 or N150 model, they are all Gen 3 × 1, top and bottom. I couldn't ascertain for that 7th bay that the OS drive presumably lives in, but that's really what you got there. Now, when you went to the i5, the 1240p model, I was kind of surprised that none of the lanes were at Gen 4 speed, given that is a Gen 4 CPU. But I can understand why maybe temperature-wise they were trying to stay on top of that. So that means that the 4 slots there at the top are Gen 3 × 2, so that's 20 gigabits per second or 2 gigabytes per second for each of those slots, and the 2 base ones were 3 × 4. So those are pretty standard class speeds that you can use for most of your Gen 3 × 4 SSDs that are quite affordable in the market right now. So a decent amount of speed. You're not hitting Gen 4, but again, given this system only has 2 10G outputs there, and you're going to be using those in conjunction with a buttload of SATA drives inside there, I think those are still pretty good proficient performance numbers, bandwidth and speed allocation, I should say, on the M.2s. Power consumption, as I mentioned earlier on, as this is a prototype, I'm trying to be slightly restrained about it right now because it's not the final product. Do keep aware of that, by the way, if you see reviews of this at least before July, that chances are everyone who is going to review this, like myself, has received the prototype model. So do keep that in mind when you're looking at the evaluation there, because this is a product still in development. But I still thought a number of you would want to know what the power consumption is, at least tentatively. So the N305 model over here, the non-Pro, I had that fully populated with drives and SSDs, with the CPU being utilized at less than 15%, but full network live activity. And it sat around 45 to 46 watts. Again, the brand tells me this is being optimized right now, but still at the moment, they're not great, but they're not terrible. Again, we'll have to wait until optimization is completed there. Now, with the i5 1240p model, again, 12 core, 16 thread to play with the CPU sitting around 15 to 30%. And by the way, that was with 8K transcodes happening, by the way. No light task indeed. It cracked up to 79 to 81 watts. Now again, that is based on quite a beefy CPU to start with, but also that was a fully populated 6 NVMe and 5 hard drive ready system running on that CPU. Again, not full flat, but again, hopefully with optimization, those numbers will improve. Fingers crossed. Now, what else you're thinking as well? With systems this beefy, what about noise? Are you going to have to keep your fingers in your ears? And I'll say right now, fans-wise, that was really the only way I could check noise levels on this. And luckily, the operating system it arrived with did give me the ability to control the fan. So I had quiet mode, standard mode, and turbo mode. In low mode, the system was only hitting around 29 dBA, which is pretty good, to be honest. When I had the system fully populated with drives, I could actually hear the drives more than the fans most of the time. And when I put the drives into lower hibernation to take them out of the equation, that's how I got around 29 to 31 dBA. Now, during automatic or standard, where it would adjust accordingly, when the system had been on for about 2.5 hours, it sat around 33 to 35 dBA. And finally, when I went into the settings and ramped up everything, up to turbo mode on everything, and then went up to 46 to 47 dBA audio. So let's hear some of that now. Next, temperatures. Again, these are prototypes. I'm evaluating prototypes, and therefore this data that I'm showing you now may be completely out of date by the time this thing actually hits people's doorsteps. But when it came to the temperatures, I'm pleased to say that the N305 model was actually not too shabby. Given a large enclosure chassis size like this, it is plastic, by the way, on the outside, but fully metal on the inside. The temperatures hit around 38 to 46 degrees when the system was in average use. Now, that wasn't bad for a structure of this scale with this many drives top and bottom. However, when it came to the i5 model, the Pro series, I already noticed very early doors, before some of my even preliminary correspondence with ORICO, that this thing was getting crazy hot. It was, the top bar at the top was actually hitting around 80 degrees, which was pretty bloody high for this kind of system. Now, I reached out to the brand and they were saying to me that at the moment this is something they'd already recognised due to a higher powered chip being used on the board at the top and pulling in too much power. At the moment they're already on a second and even preliminary third gen alternative for that board to be used across these systems, and that chip more precisely an improved vented cooling for that slot. So although I'm showing it to you here, the reason I'm showing it to you is to show you that the brand did react, and they do say they are working on addressing this, and hopefully when we do look at the non-prototype final revision, we'll be able to see those numbers be drastically improved. Next up, we're going to talk about software. Now, if you don't care about the software they're going to include with this, I get it. You know, you might be going to run Unraid or TrueNAS on this anyway, but I think there are some users that are going to buy this because it is a turnkey solution. So I do think it's worth looking at the software. Now, I did a deep dive on it before I did a lot of this other stuff, but I'll say right now, just further information since recording the software section of this when I did my first dipping into it. Number one, this is confirmed to be software that is running on FNOS or FINU operating system. That is a Chinese closed operating system that is being released to consumers completely free, but modified westernized versions are available for purchase by brands and companies to use. We've done a whole dedicated video on that may or may not be live already. If it is, you'll probably see a thumbnail on screen. And that software, by the way, isn't finished. There's lots of gaps, language changes there, there's features and facilities that are missing from it. I'll say again, as mentioned earlier, there's no SSH option on there. There's a few other bells and whistles that were missing from it. It was still very responsive and reactive, but I think for now, let's dip into exactly what that software looks like, what it gives and what it doesn't. So here we are on the desktop client application for Windows. There is also a mobile application that I'm going to talk about in a wee bit, but here is pretty much what you're going to be using with that client. I've already registered the device. You've got access to the full range of applications and services here, and although most of the things I'm going to say are broadly positive, I am going to open up immediately by saying this does not feel finished. I know this is a system not quite at the point of full traditional retail, but I'll say right now it doesn't feel quite finished yet. Things like two-factor authentication unsurprisingly are absent here, which super annoy me. I have already created an administrator account, and you can create additional user accounts and user groups if you choose to, and you can set permissions as you would expect. So a lot of the service options in the background are there, and that, by the way, extends quite extensively to how you're going to access the system, be it remotely, be it locally, using ORICO relay services there. I know a lot of you probably won't, and if you choose to, you can take advantage of Docker to install a myriad of different remote access applications. There isn't actually an app store right now, something I found really weird, something I kind of expected from a NAS coming out of China. For example, there are loads of apps and services rolled in with the device, all of the multimedia ones, there's backup ones, there are system file sharing applications there, the HDMI application services there, but there isn't a virtual machine appliance, there isn't a dedicated Plex appliance, there isn't a dedicated Jellyfin appliance. There is lots of things missing though, iSCSI, that kind of stuff that we're kind of used to being absent in some services, but this is quite a premium package we're talking about here. Now, what do I mean by this service and apps not feeling quite finished? Well, a large part of that comes down to localization. For example, here I've selected the region. As you can see there, I've already set myself up in Europe. I'm already set up in the right region. I've gone for English. I've gone for operating system English. But more often than not, I'll be in some of the apps and services. And although we see here some consistent applications and services all in English, if I go ahead for something like the movie database here, even though it's gone for the metadata scraping to find all of the background images and information and cast details and more, a lot of it is, scraped online and with a lot of Chinese characters there. Again, this isn't me having a go. I know there are going to be people in China using this system, but there isn't any easy way that I could find to get all of this running in English, and that was kind of inconsistency there. And I know a lot of users that purchase a NAS from out of country and particularly out of region are going to have slight concerns about a system that isn't, native or at least feeling localized fully. Now, again, as I said earlier on, this doesn't feel like something that's ready for traditional retail yet, but it's not pretending to be. This is still a product in development. So therefore, language and localization may be something that comes later. But things like the device monitor in there, which is good to have, I will say, but there are just design inconsistencies from time to time where a lot of this information could be displayed a little bit more graphically. The apps and services on offer still feel great. They're very responsive. The file manager does exactly what you want it to do if you want to transfer data on the fly. When I tried to transfer stuff, it did it. It didn't just pretend or kind of act out that it was or not doing it. It would be a case of being able to share files quickly, being able to copy data directly onto other parts of the system was responsive. I want to go ahead and move that into downloads. I can, and it would do the moving, it would do it, and then we get the real-time information there at the top. Populating the files and folders with data that we wanted roughly was all available. All the way through, it did feel consistent. It wasn't perfect, but there were times overall where I thought, yeah, they're onto something here. Now, again, when setting up remote access using those different file protocols, they're all there, the majority of which are disabled by default. If we want to utilize this for backups, backing up individually from those client applications and services, tailored backups and more are conducted here. There's still gaps in that lineup. Again, hopefully these are things that get fleshed out at launch, but still nonetheless, they're not terrible. Alongside that, AI photo recognition is built in here, and again, it probably could do with a little bit of a refresh in how it's being displayed. For example, image loading error there, kind of odd, even though when I go into it I can see the image, but for some reason it's having difficulty loading it in there. If I take advantage of the facial recognition there and I go ahead, this is someone and I can see all of the photos of them, and if I want to name that person I can. I don't quite like that it's opening in a fresh window every time, but at the very least it is still doing that. The same goes with scenery, or if you go ahead and use the search, you can use bespoke searches. So if I go for cake, and it will search for pictures of cake, we're able to find all of those images there, whereas none of those were available in the pre-designated region. So a lot of that semantic search stuff is built in natively there. We can go for tree or tree man, have those put together, and we can find that stuff using that semantic search. And a lot of that is done automatically, by the way, there in the background. I couldn't find any way to turn it off, however, and I think there are some users that might like to turn those features and services off. We are still talking about a system that is local only. I've made sure to sever it from remote access for this section of the video at least, but nonetheless it is still something that I would like to see a little bit more refinement on the presentation. However, one thing I am pleased to confirm is that storage, and that is that the storage here takes advantage of multiple file systems and your friend of mine, ZFS. Setting up storage is really straightforward. It doesn't require any deep level understanding like you would find in something like a true NAS, and you can go ahead immediately and just create yourselves a RAID Z1, Z2, Z3 for 1, 2 and triple parity. And again, you can set a lot of the encryption specifications really easily here during the setup. For example, this is the one I've already set up in advance, and if there's space available it will let me know where those partitions I've got some expandability there. Again, all the way through you can go ahead and tailor and change a lot of this system's storage areas. So for example, this storage pool, we can go and find out more information about the status, and that goes into command line. For example, snapshot management, we can go ahead and create snapshots very quickly and easily on the fly. So if we go for that one there, I'm just going to type anything in. We've now created ourselves a snapshot that is reactive to the system. On top of that, creating those areas of caching with the SSDs. Again, we can go ahead and involve and replace disks on the fly, as well as grouping expansions on there and scanning the pool for inconsistencies and perhaps preparing for a RAID repair, as well as in the event of a RAID repair being required, all of it being manageable and actionable quite conveniently both from the desktop and the mobile appliance, something we'll talk about in a wee bit. Right the way down, by the way, to finding out more about your individual disks, where you can find out more about it and managing individual disk performance testing and mounting secure arrays, that sort of thing, and that external storage via USB. So there's a lot here. It is swish. It just doesn't quite feel finished and polished yet, but that might change. I do wish they would factor in two-factor authentication. They've even gone for a password vault. There isn't a security scanner appliance here. Rather disappointing. There isn't that two-factor authentication I've talked about there. They've nailed down a lot of the fundamentals, but not all the fundamentals, particularly modern NAS fundamentals. There's other apps that I think a lot of users won't use, like chat, which is good for individual NAS server users to be able to communicate, send links and more. And again, setting up remote access, setting up local area network access is easy, is convenient, particularly on a system like this with a huge amount of storage and network connectivity. That is going to be desirable. However, I don't think this is finished yet, hence why I will come back to this in a later video, and at least for now I would say that if you're buying this for the software, maybe hold out a bit longer. That said, in terms of security, it isn't completely hands-off. So for example, if you go in with your account, not only is there the standard nonsense where you can just change your password, on top of that there is the ability to create a 6-digit passcode for accessing the private space of the user, as well as the ability to disable an account on the fly when needed. So on top of that, you can go into, for example, this section here, which not only allows you to immediately disable all remote access via the internet if you choose to, but you can also disable P2P services, or at least force P2P to be internal networking only there. So again, you've got some levels of control and switching on the system, as well as with individual user control as well, to set the system to personal or private mode. Private mode is when you need to activate that 6-digit password, and that means that you can access some of the more hidden areas of the system that you may have tailored to be a great deal more confidential. Again, it's still not as straightforward as using two-factor authentication or write-once-read many areas of storage, but it's still better than nothing. Another thing I did think worth touching on that is weirdly absent in a lot of 2024, 2025 NAS devices, and particularly software that's being rolled out right now, is the support of power scheduling. I know that doesn't sound that exciting when you've got things like Wake-on-LAN, something this does support, by the way, and I'll get onto that in a second. The ability to create that power schedule, you can have the system turned off during the night when you know no one's going to be accessing it, to create that perfect air gap, is something to talk about, because weirdly this is not as common as it should be. The ability to be able to create a turn on, turn off schedule for the system, as well as energy saving to put the system manually into hibernation when needed. It's something that we generally only find in more of the more established software players in the market right now. And if I sign out of this system right now and I log out, you're able to see here along the bottom that there are systems, options and settings for you to do more with the system in order to take advantage of shutting down the system without fully logging into the system, going ahead and creating that Wake-on-LAN when needed, all of which built into that client. I'm not going to say it's earth-shattering, but it's weirdly absent on a lot of NAS options in the market right now. Likewise, when it comes to file sharing, there are some options here that are just simply not available in some of the NAS software startups in the market right now. So, for example, when it comes to SMB, sure, there's SMB, but you can enable multi-channel if needed. Likewise, if you want to go ahead and create personalized access, and that goes, by the way, all the way down to if you want to go ahead and create bespoke passwords or sub-admin passwords to allow you to restrict some levels of read, write, or read-only level access to a lot of your file service systems on the device. Again, all of those file services, all of which have their own configuration options, what you want to mount. Again, we're looking at FFTP and NFS and more, all of which can be manually done. They're all turned off on the fly, but it's leveling up and having all of that controller configuration via that single portal. I like what they've done here. I just wish it had a little bit more polish right now, as there's still some of those conflictions of language and some of the conflictions of design policy. Now, the mobile application, on the other hand, feels a little bit more complete. It's still got a ways to go, but I will say rather than the desktop application, the mobile one does seem to be pretty fully formed. I'm accessing this on an Android device. As you can see, we can get real-time information about our device, hardware utilization there. It's all pretty kind of intimidating there, but then you've got the much more user-friendly OS there. Everything from photo albums that we can manage there. Again, whether it is we're using some of the AI stuff, you can see there some of the unfinished stuff there. It's kind of wrapped around a lot of the text. And if we go for searching there, we'll go for a quick search there. Let's go for tree. We're able to see pictures of tree, and again, it's kind of customized whatever you want to do. That semantic search stuff. So if I go for cheese, let's go for that, and maybe another one, man outside. Let's go for something like that. As you can see, we've got options. It's not fully accurate, but it's not terrible. Now, alongside that, we've got the movies application. Still a lot more of that Chinese character stuff there on screen. Wasn't able to find a way to adjust that, even though the application I'm indeed using on English settings. I made sure to select the region was English, as you can see there, and in my current time zone, all accurate. It's not a bad application by any measure. Pretty much everything you're going to need to do, you can do here, from managing your backups between the phone and the NAS, as well as managing some of those off-site backups as well, setting up those SMB shares, lovely and easy there. File manager built into it so you can access the NAS and go on an incremental file folder level with ease. It's all set up for you there, and all the files are open natively within the app, as well as the ability to upload or share files nice and easily. There's even a nifty little option there to record stuff live directly onto the NAS if you choose to. And again, it's very responsive, very snappy. It's pretty much doing everything you want it to. You can even manage that storage pretty darn well, as far as a lot of the desktop options as well, right the way down to setting up some of those RAID parities and setting up some of the kind of file systems that you want to go for. It's all lovely and presentable there in the app. I'm not going to say it's 100%, but I'm going to say it's pretty darn close for no doubt what ORICO is trying to roll out here. And pretty much all of the applications can be managed here, right the way down, by the way, to Docker, something that normally translates pretty poorly onto a mobile phone GUI, but is still pretty darn good here. And again, with all of the applications, all of them can be accessed on the fly, as well as managing the HDMI output, which I know some of you are probably going to enjoy doing if you want to connect the NAS to a larger screen and then manage what's being played from the phone. I'm not going to say it's intuitive as a standard, remote control from your sofa, but it's not that bad. Now, I'll almost certainly review this application and the desktop client a great deal more when this system reaches traditional retail, but at least for now, I'll say that this user interface, be it that you're using a desktop or the mobile client, is still pretty comprehensive and good. It's detailed, it's giving you the elements of control that you're going to need, it gives you all of the options, and I would argue you're able to control the NAS almost completely without having to use any desktop appliance. There is still the lack of that two-factor authentication, there is still the lack of a lot of the predominant English character and language support on the system, or at least by default, and there's just times where it feels slightly inconsistent in terms of its design and UI, but I will say for the most part the applications and services I'm seeing here are exactly what I would like to see. And although we are still talking about a NAS system that you could go ahead and lump on a third-party OS if you choose, it is still a market step up from a lot of alternatives in the market, such as Casa OS and Zimmer OS, which, although have nailed down some of the fundamentals, have still lacked a lot of the kind of flair and AAA applications and services that a lot of modern NAS users have come to get used to. And let's not overlook the fact this is a single application to manage everything. That's not going to be for everyone, and some users actually prefer to have dedicated media apps for media, file apps for file apps, backup apps for backup apps. But there is still an argument that having it all in a multi-Swiss Army knife tool is going to be appealing for some. Still, it doesn't feel finished quite yet, and I am looking forward to seeing where it goes. But I think that's enough for now about these devices. I'm going to be coming back to this and then some in July when we have an improved version of this device here. I wanted to make this video now because I know there are some users that were already getting some inklings about this ORICO NAS that were asking about whether it's worth waiting out for if and when it arrives on crowdfunding, or just wait until it goes to traditional retail. I'll say right now, everything I've seen so far is very, very promising. These are a brand that have quite a decent amount of experience when it comes to USB peripherals, when it comes to storage peripherals, M.2 NVMe, 10GBE adapters, Thunderbolt and stuff like that. So I know some of that surrounding technology and presumably the partnerships they've made and the fact that they already have a NAS series for a number of years anyway, all work in their favour compared with some offshoot never heard of brand on crowdfunding. Nevertheless, this is crowdfunding and these are prototypes, neither of which may be representative of the final product you receive. So keep that in mind. But based on everything I've seen, I'm still pretty pleased with what ORICO are doing here. And it'll be really interesting to see what the final revision of these products is going to be. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Hopefully a written review of this prototype, or both of these prototypes, will be listed below. And I look forward to seeing you in July, hopefully when we see the final product here on the channel. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. There's links in the description to find out more, and I will see you next time.